Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing okay as you tune into this one. Do you need to set boundaries around lifestyle habits, obligations as you're recovering from anxiety? I don't know if I've addressed it specifically. I talk about it perhaps in the context of other topics. So, do you need to do it, or can you just practice acceptance, allowing, letting it all happen, going loose, and not need to address that stuff? So, what do you do? What's the fine line between living life, moving forward with life? But then what about if all the life stuff gets too much? So there was a question on one of the videos I did, I think recently, around how your stress temperature, your rising stress temperature fuels sensitization. And in that metaphor, I talk about the importance of trying to get back closer to green zone, or this mindful living where we're less sensitized. And so the question that came up was, I'd love to hear more detail on how to get back in the green zone when we still have a lot of life stressors, work, kids, aging parents, etc. What methods do we use not to let these stressful tasks build into anxiety? So great question. Is it just the allowing method? So really good question, because I talk about accepting difficult thoughts, allowing, going loose, not fighting. We don't want to run from these difficult symptoms, thoughts, stressful events, whatever it might be. We want to allow and accept as best we can. But that can sometimes lead us to the false belief that we should be able to just tackle everything in life the same way. So, whilst it is true that we can always employ the allow, acceptance approach to anything, so I think that's the starting point, absolutely, because sometimes there's a lot of stuff that we just can't control. But it doesn't mean we have to then accept every single thing, every single difficult task, obligation, whatever it might be that comes up. So, if I take a more extreme example, if you're working 16 hours a day, non-stop, no breaks, you're living on adrenaline, you're running from meeting to meeting, you're doing a task, you're doing manual labor, whatever it is, it's going to make practicing recovering from anxiety very difficult. So if you're just kind of white knuckling just to get the job done, you're hanging on, you're trying to concentrate, you're effectively making your system more sensitized. And then when you finally slow down, you might get a surge of adrenaline, you might realize the heart's racing, some what ifs come in, intrusive thoughts, whatever. And then you've got to deal with all this extra sensitization and then try and practice with that. So it's going to be a lot harder. And you can imagine if you're doing that day in and day out, how much harder it makes practice and recovery. And often it's our lifestyle habits that perhaps have in part contributed to where we're at. So often we've used distraction as the only method to cope, throwing ourselves into work, throwing ourselves into life, having kids, putting all our expectations in our kids, or living life through them, and we haven't really taken time to slow down. So, to cut a long story short, boundaries are very important. The challenge can be is that often we're not used to setting boundaries. We've formed the habit of not setting boundaries, just like we've formed the anxiety habit. We're used to saying yes, people pleasing, saying yes, I'll sort out all the healthcare for my aging parents, even when I've got kids and I'm working a full-time job. Now, of course, there are things that have to be done. We want to be real about that, but it's not until we take a step back, and this is a lot of the work I do in coaching, help people zoom out on their life and get perspective on all the obligations, the stuff that's going on, to see what can they start to let go of, so they can just slow down life, create space. It doesn't have to be a lot. It can just start by people actually taking breaks when they're at work, instead of eating at their desk, half working, or not having any breaks if they're out in the field doing manual labor, whatever it might be. So starting to have breaks. It can be something simple like that. It can simply be, if you're doing the primary care for your aging parents, getting your brother or sister to help. Thinking about some alternative support that you can get. If you're doing all the care for your kids, getting your partner to help out a bit more. Maybe we just don't have those conversations because we've fallen into the habit of not doing it. It might be at work, Do I just say yes to all the client demands without even thinking about it? Do I respond to emails straight away? Do I have to get through my to-do list? And if I don't, I can't relax, but that leaves me working 16-hour days. So there's a lot of opportunities to slow life down, carve out space so that you're regularly throughout each day having moments to reset, recharge. Practice as thoughts come up throughout the day, anxious thoughts, allowing, accepting, going loose, as opposed to kind of hanging on because you're so tired, running from obligation to obligation. That when you only practice with the intense symptoms because it's the intense symptoms that force you to stop and practice, whereas you can kind of push them away when you're that busy and life is that full. So boundaries are actually incredibly important and they can speed up your recovery. So they can allow you to use the tools and methods and practice more effectively. So it's important to keep moving forward with life. It's important to work. It's important to see people. It's important to engage, because the other extreme is we're sitting at home on our own and we've got too much time to think about the anxiety state. And that's obviously counterproductive. As I talk about in a lot of videos, it's important to keep working, keep living life, keep moving forward, but we've all got to be discerning about and be real with ourselves and maybe ask ourselves some difficult questions. Am I doing too much? And it's not giving me the energy or the capacity to practice. If I'm just so tired because of these 16-hour days, I'm racing from work straight into parent mode, the kids are in a difficult phase of life, then I just don't have the energy to go, well, what do I have to do again? Go loose, allow. It's just easier to white knuckle it, to hold on and just hope the symptoms go away, or go to our escapes, our coping mechanisms that aren't necessarily helpful in the long term. So boundaries are incredibly important. So I encourage you all to think about what you can start to do to carve out some time, if this is relevant for you, to start to slow down. What are some of the easy things you can get support with, let go of, whether it be work, home life? And can you just start to slow the pace of life down if you're not sure? Walk slower to get the keys as you race out the door. Walk slower to pick up, your young child when they're crying, not racing over and adding tension to tension. So these are the opportunities that you can find as a starting point, because again, if there's too many obligations, there's too much going on, you're too busy, you're essentially working against yourself. So obviously not deliberately. I know there's a lot of stuff to get done. If you need support with that and you want someone to use as a sounding board, do book in a coaching session. It comes up a lot. It's a lot of the work I do, in addition to help people implementing the tools and methods I describe around difficult thoughts, symptoms, etc. So I hope that helps. Any questions or comments on that, please let me know. And again, I hope to see you again very soon. Take care.